Okay, so if you're a European company, you know that entering the US market is a huge opportunity. But let's be real, it's also a high stakes game. The US is one of the most litigious places on the planet. If you get your legal structure wrong from the start, well, you could lose everything. So, how do you build a fortress for your business that can actually withstand that? Let's dive in.
That sounds like a typical business quote, right? But in the US, it's not just advice, it's a survival rule. Why? Because getting your legal structure right is the single most important thing you can do to limit your liability. And get this, it's often way cheaper than insurance, and it has the biggest risk mitigating effect you can imagine. So, what happens when you mess this up? What's the one misstep that can put your entire European parent company on the chopping block? You'd be surprised at how simple and how devastating that mistake can be. To really see just how high the stakes are, let me tell you two stories. And these aren't just hypotheticals. This is what actually happens when that foundational legal structure is weak or just not there at all. First, let's talk about a Danish company. They decided to do business directly in the US, just using their main Danish entity. So you can guess what happened next, right? A lawsuit. And the other side could see a clear, direct path to all the company's money back home in Denmark. And to make it even worse, their insurance said, sorry, we don't cover your US operations. The result? A brutally expensive settlement. Okay, but this one's really interesting because this company actually thought they were protected. They set up a US entity. But here's where it all went wrong. They didn't create a real legal separation. They were signing US contracts with their Austrian parent company. They totally blurred the lines. So when a lawsuit hit, the court basically said, you're acting like one company, so we'll treat you like one. And suddenly, the entire global company's assets were on the table. Okay, I know these stories are kind of scary, but here's the good news. There is a straightforward and really powerful solution. There's a way to build that protective wall around your European assets, and it's called a blocker entity. So what exactly is a blocker entity? Think of it like this. It's a legal firewall. It's a dedicated US-based company that sits right between your US operations and your European parent. Its whole job is to be a shield, to stop any lawsuit that pops up in the US from ever reaching your assets back home. And this slide just shows it perfectly. Look at the left side. Without a blocker, a US lawsuit can come right after the parent company's money. It's totally exposed. But on the right, with a properly set up blocker entity, that liability gets stopped cold. It's contained right there in the US, and the parent company's assets are safe and sound. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Can't a US judge just pierce the corporate veil and come after the parent company anyway? Here's the good news. That is incredibly difficult to do in the US. It's a legal move that's really only for the most extreme cases, like blatant fraud. Look, as long as you're operating in good faith, treating the US entity like a real, separate company with its own books and bank accounts, that corporate shield is exceptionally strong. All right, so we get the what and the why. Now for the fun part, the how. How do you actually design and build this legal fortress for yourself? So let's start with the most basic setup. This is like level 1, but it's super effective. Your European parent company owns 100% of a new US subsidiary. And here's the absolute key. This US entity handles all US business, all the contracts, all the sales, everything. That simple separation, as long as you respect it with separate finances and formalities, creates that critical firewall we've been talking about. But what if you're not just a simple operation? What if you've got valuable real estate or some really important intellectual property, or maybe you're operating in a few different states? Well, you can take this whole thing a step further. This is what we call the fortress model, and it is so smart. You have a US holding company under the European parent, but then it owns separate companies, usually LLCs, for your different functions. One for the day-to-day business, another for your real estate, and a third just to hold your IP. So why go to all this trouble? Well, imagine a slip and fall lawsuit happens at one of your properties. With this structure, that lawsuit is trapped inside the real estate LLC. Your operations and your valuable IP are completely walled off. They're totally protected. Okay, so we've been throwing around terms like subsidiary and LLC, but what are the actual options you have? Let's take a super quick look at what your main choices are. So you've basically got 3 main flavors to choose from. First, the corporation. This is usually the best bet if you're planning to have lots of investors or issue stock. Next up is the LLC, the limited liability company. It's super flexible and it's perfect for that fortress model we just looked at. And finally, you've got the limited partnership, or LP,
which is generally used for pretty specific tax situations. But the big takeaway here is that all three of them can give you that crucial liability shield you need.
All right, I have to address this one because I get this question all the time. There's this myth that every single serious business in the US has to be a Delaware corporation. Let's clear that up right now.
Okay, here's the deal with Delaware. It is the gold standard if, and this is a big if you're chasing venture capital funding or planning to go public with an IPO. But for most privately owned European companies, it often makes way more sense to just incorporate where you actually operate. It gives you a home field advantage in local courts, it can look better to your local customers, and you don't have the extra cost and headache of managing an out-of-state company. Whew, okay, we have covered a ton of ground, from horror stories to fortress designs. So let's strip everything else away and focus on the one thing, the absolute recipe for success. And honestly, it all comes down to this one single idea. If you walk away with only one thing from this whole course, please make it this. Start with at least one dedicated US entity. That single step is the most powerful thing you can do to protect your entire company back in Europe. It's the foundation of everything. And you've got to stop thinking of this as just a cost. It's not. It's an investment. Spending a few $1,000s now protects millions in assets back home. It gives you a safe and stable platform to grow your US business. And if things don't work out, it lets you cleanly shut down the US side without putting your core business at risk. It's an investment in peace of mind. So, there you have it. The fortress is designed, the legal shield is up. But that's really just the blueprint, right? The next big challenge is bringing it all to life and running it effectively day to day. Your shield is in place, but are you ready to execute?